It's terror time. Ethan had always been a light sleeper. The slightest noise would jolt him awake, and tonight was no different. It started with a faint sound, like a muffled cry, seeping through the thin walls of his apartment. At first, he tried to ignore it, burying his face deeper into the pillow. But the cries grew louder, more desperate, a woman's voice pleading, begging for help. He sat up, his heart pounding. The voice was coming from the apartment next door, where his neighbor, Jessica, lived. She was a quiet woman, always polite but distant. Ethan had never seen her with visitors, never heard her raise her voice, but now her screams were raw, guttural, filled with a terror that made his skin crawl. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his fingers trembling as he explained the situation. The operator assured him that help was on the way, but the screams were unbearable. They clawed at his ears, each one more agonizing than the last. He couldn't just sit there and wait. He had to do something. Ethan rushed to his door, hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The air was thick, oppressive, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Jessica's door was slightly ajar, and a faint, flickering light spilled out from the crack. He pushed it open, his breath catching in his throat. The apartment was a mess. Furniture was overturned, pictures ripped from the walls, and shards of glass littered the floor. At the end of the hallway, Jessica lay sprawled on the ground, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and her mouth moved as if she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. "Jessica!" Ethan shouted, rushing toward her. But as he got closer, he froze. Her eyes weren't looking at him. They were looking through him at something behind him. He turned, but there was nothing there. Just the empty hallway, the flickering light casting long, jagged shadows on the walls. "Llegaste demasiado tarde, pequeño," Jessica susurró, su voz apenas audible. It wasn't her voice. It was deeper, guttural, dripping with malice. Ethan's blood ran cold. Before he could react, Jessica's body convulsed violently. Her back arched, her limbs twisted, and her head snapped to the side with a sickening crack. Her eyes rolled back, revealing only the whites, and a low, guttural growl escaped her throat. Ethan stumbled backward, his mind screaming at him to run, but his legs refused to move. Jessica's body began to rise, her movements jerky and unnatural, as if she was being pulled by invisible strings. Her head tilted to the side, her neck bending at an impossible angle, and she smiled, a wide, grotesque grin that stretched far beyond the limits of her face. "Run," she whispered, her voice trembling with effort. It was Jessica again, but only for a moment. Her body shuddered, and the thing inside her took control once more. "Run, Ethan. It's too late for me." Ethan turned and bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. The windows followed one by one, as if an invisible force was sealing off every exit. The lights flickered, then went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. The only sound was Jessica's laughter, deep and filled with a malevolence. He ran blindly through the apartment, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear her, no, it behind him, the sound of her body dragging across the floor, her laughter growing louder, more frenzied. He reached the stairs and climbed them two at a time, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The attic. He had to get to the attic. Maybe he could barricade himself there until the police arrived, but as he ran, he felt something strange. His scalp tingled, and he reached up to find clumps of hair falling out, drifting to the floor like dead leaves. His nose began to bleed, the warm, metallic taste filling his mouth. He wiped it away, but the blood kept flowing, dripping down his chin and onto his shirt. He reached the attic and slammed the door shut behind him, fumbling with the lock. The room was small, cramped, filled with boxes and old furniture. The only light came from a single cracked window, the moon casting an eerie glow over the room. Ethan pulled out his phone, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He opened the camera and hit record. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know what's happening, but I think I'm going to die. Jessica. She's not Jessica anymore. There's something inside her. Something evil. I don't know what it is, but it's coming for me. If anyone finds this, please tell my mom I love her." The attic door rattled, the sound of claws scraping against the wood. Ethan's breath hitched, and he backed away, his phone still recording. The door burst open, and Jessica stood there, her body twisted and broken, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light, her jaw unhinged, stretching wider and wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth and a black, gaping void. "Ethan," she hissed, her voice a guttural growl. "Etienne, I know where you are." He backed into a corner, his phone slipping from his hand and clattering to the floor. The screen cracked, but the camera kept recording, capturing the horror unfolding before it. As the creature consumed him, Ethan's final thought was of his mother. He whispered the words, his voice barely audible, as the darkness swallowed him whole. "I love you, Mom." The camera continued to record, capturing the creature's final triumphant roar, before the screen went black. "Be careful. Lock the door, or maybe better not. Take care, my shadows."